All right, looks like we're ready to go. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Philip Shannon with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, South Pacific Division. We are very excited to be here today. This is our first time appearing at the Tribal Conference, and this is a small enough room that we think that we can make this more interactive. So if you have questions or comments along the way, just raise your hand. And we'll come around with a microphone. There'll also be time at the end for questions. And for additional dialogue, we're going to stay here a little bit afterwards if you want to have more one-on-one conversations with the Corps of Engineers staff. Sorry, I lost my presentation. All right. Okay, so let me introduce on the next slide. Let's see. Okay, so here's a little rundown about what we're going to discuss today, who we are, our areas of responsibility, our civil works missions, our regulatory authorities, and the Waters of the United States definition, permit requirements, and our tribal policies. Okay, so let me tell you who is here today. So as I said, I'm Philip Shannon. I am the Regulatory Program Manager for the South Pacific Division. My role is I'm sort of the intermediary between headquarters and the districts here. The districts are the ones that actually do the on-the-ground actions. I look at issues that are more regional in nature and also make sure that policies get implemented from the headquarters down to the districts. We have Jim Mazza. Jim, will you raise your hand? So Jim is the regulatory chief of the San Francisco district. I'm going to pop up a map later on so you can see the various areas of responsibilities for the three districts that would be involved in this EPA region. We have Michael Jewell. He is the regulatory chief of our Sacramento district. He has also graciously agreed to have the second microphone and will be walking around. Oh, Jim has it now. Okay. So they will walk around with the microphone if you have a question or a comment. And we have Tina Somanek, who is the planning project manager and tribal liaison for the Sacramento district. I have a slide later on with where I'll talk a little bit more about who the tribal liaisons are and what they do. All right, so here are the tribal liaisons that we have throughout the South Pacific Division. So we have with 4 districts in our division. SPA is Albuquerque District. SPK is Sacramento, and we have 2 tribal liaisons for Sacramento. SPL is Los Angeles District, and SPN is San Francisco District. And I did talk to Bryce earlier. All of this presentation is all going to be made available to you afterwards. So you'll be able to go back and look at any of this information, and there's web links and things like that as well that may be helpful to you. So the tribal liaisons, it comes out of our Tribal Nations program, and they are the people at the district that look at tribal issues across programs within the Corps of Engineers. So they make sure that they look at things like, are we being consistent across programs? How is our communication with the tribes going? Are we sufficiently providing one door to the Corps, which is something that we strive to do. We are trying to make it easier to access the Corps of Engineers, and direct you to who you need to talk to instead of just saying, oh, well, you need to call somebody else. They also work on, there's an annual report where they look at how we're doing as a program when it comes to our tribal issues. They compile that report and submit it up to our headquarters. All right, so we also have something very special within South Pacific Division that doesn't exist in other divisions. We have the Tribal Nations Technical Center of Expertise. The abbreviation is TNTCX, and it is a center of expertise on tribal issues, on tribal programs, and it serves the entire Corps of Engineers and is accessible to other divisions as well. If they want to tap this resource. We are trying to get the word out to get more districts and more divisions across the Corps to utilize the resources here, because it's very useful to us. Because we wear a lot of hats in the regulatory program. Dealing with tribal issues is just one of those hats. So we're stretched thin, so it helps to have experts that you can go to when you have to dive deep into certain issues. And so these are our experts on tribal programs. So they provide support for tribal engagement to USACE, to Department of Defense, and to other agencies as well. They provide comprehensive information on federally recognized Indian tribes, current policies, template agreements, and engagement best practices. They have extensive experience working with tribes and indigenous groups across the nation, as well as a wealth of knowledge of cross-cultural communication and conflict resolution. They can bring that knowledge to bear to enhance our mission outcomes, cultivate healthy relationships with the tribes, and develop effective consultation policies. All right, so there's, I think, about 6 staff people at the TNTCX, but these are the 2 guys that are our go-to people for regulatory. We provide some of our funding to them to help us with their expertise. Mark Giflin, he is a TNTCX project manager and tribal liaison. He is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to tribal issues, tribal coordination. He also helped us to develop a mapping system and database so that we can identify tribal resources so that when we have a project, we get an idea about what may be there and what kind of consultations we may have to do. Chris Parrish, he is an archaeologist. So he helps us with our historic preservation issues, 401, and 401 of the Historic Preservation Act. And, you know, he would be our intermediary if we need help working with the tribal historic preservation offices and things like that. So I have a link to the TNCCX. So when you get the presentation later and you want to check out their website to learn more about them, you can go to that website. All right, so let's talk about some of the Corps of Engineers missions. We have a military side. The military side provides engineering, construction, and maintenance of military installations around the world. We have an environmental side that they restore degraded ecosystems, manage natural resources, and clean up sites for past and present military activities. We have emergency operations. So our emergency operations provide support to FEMA. They help in emergency situations. They have a particular capabilities when it comes to bringing emergency power back on, providing temporary roofing and housing and debris management. They also provide engineering support to FEMA. We have our civil works side. And Civil Works develops civil works projects to improve navigable channels, reduce flood and storm damage, and restore aquatic ecosystems. And we have our research and development and our sustainability missions. And these are missions that support the other missions. So basically, if we have a question, we might provide that question to research and development. If we have questions about, well, how well does this new methodology work for telling apart a wetland soil from a non-wetland soil, or how do we evaluate this hydrologic parameter in the field? They're the people that we would go to, and they would conduct a research project and get back with an answer. Our sustainability department, they're looking at the long-term consequences of what the other missions do. Environmental, social, and economic sustainability is what they're aiming for. All right, so here's just a listing of some of the specific things that are under each of these programs. So military, you can see installation support. Environmental, you can see brownfields and Superfund cleanup sites. Emergency operations, hurricanes, droughts, and flood assistance. And research and development helps with the civilian side to research issues for us, and also for researching for the warfighting side. And then sustainability, they're involved in climate preparedness, and they do a report every year in a scorecard about how we're doing. All right, so then you have Civil Works. So there's just some fun stats in the diagram about all of the things that our Civil Works program does. They do flood risk management, navigation, making sure that our navigation channels are dredged so that we can get vessels through there. You can see the Tribal Nations program is under Civil Works, which is where the tribal liaisons fit. And you can see the regulatory program. That's us. That's where we come in. So we are nested within Civil Works. All right. So here is a map of the South Pacific Division, and you can see the where our areas of responsibility are. I try to designate it by color to match the map as best that I can. So the Albuquerque district, that is that yellow that runs from Colorado down through New Mexico to Texas. And that is where the headquarters of our TNTCX is physically located, although some of our staff may not necessarily live there. So Mark Giflin lives in Colorado, for example. That green area in the southwest, that is our Los Angeles district. It covers Southern California and Arizona. We do not have somebody from Los Angeles district here with us today, but we're happy to pass along any comments or information to them. If you have questions, we'll definitely connect you to the right people. The purple, that is San Francisco district. It's a coastal district. And then that big green area, that is Sacramento district. And you can see they cover quite a large area, parts of California, Nevada, and Utah. All right. Okay. So here is another map of our area, and you can see the tribal lands in gray there. Few facts: we have 182 federally recognized tribal nations within South Pacific Division. 112 of those are within California, and we have more than 60 non-federally recognized tribal nations within California. Okay, so talk about the regulatory program and what we do. So we are one of the oldest programs in the federal government. Initially, we served a simple purpose to protect and maintain the navigation capability of our navigable waters. Over time, that changed, and Congress tasked us to do more with our program. And so we have evolved from legislation, from court decisions, and new statutory mandates in several aspects in the breadth, complexity, and authority that we cover. We're committed to protecting the nation's aquatic resources and navigation capability, while also allowing reasonable development through fair and balanced permit decisions. The Corps evaluates permit applications that occur in the nation's waters, including wetlands. In addition, we check on permit compliance. We may take enforcement action if somebody does work without a permit in a water that we regulate. We also can sign mitigation. So these are agreements where it's a multi-agency team that reviews basically a restoration project that is proposed as a business venture. So they propose the project, and if we agree that it's a good project that's going to provide for benefits to aquatic resources, then we will sign off on it, and there will be a pool of credits available that they can sell as mitigation for the permits that people have to get from us in order to place fill in a water or a wetland. And the banks have a credit release schedule, and that schedule is based on hitting milestones. So they have to perform, or else they're not going to get their credits released for sale. And that is how we make sure that those sites are successful. And those sites are going to be preserved in perpetuity with funding for management. Okay, so let's talk about our regulatory authorities. We have Section 10 of the Rivers and Harbors Act, which this is the authority to regulate all structures or work in, over, or under navigable waters of the U.S. So it's broad in the suite of activities that would be regulated, but it's narrow in the fact that they have to be designated as navigable waters in order to use this authority. Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. This gives us the authority to regulate the discharge of dredged or fill material in waters of the U.S., including wetlands. Now, waters of the U.S. is something that changes over time based on court rulings and things like that. So there may be waters that are not waters of the U.S. in which we cannot regulate, and other waters are waters of the U.S. And we do that analysis on a case-by-case basis. And we have to, under our current policy, EPA, we send our decisions to EPA on jurisdiction through a coordination process before we can finalize them. And then we have Section 103 of the Marine Protection Research and Sanctuaries Act. This gives us the authority to regulate the transport of dredged material for the purpose of ocean disposal. All right, so let's talk a little bit more of Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. So in order to, for work to be regulated, it must involve a discharge of fill, which is a solid material, such as riprap, concrete, or dirt, into a water of the United States by a person through a point source. So general runoff that we can't pin to a particular point source, we don't regulate. And where the activity is not exempt. There's certain activities that are exempt by law that we cannot regulate. Excavation is not a regulated activity. Now, it's not a regulated activity under 404 of the Clean Water Act, but it would be an activity under Section 10 of the Rivers and Harbors Act if it is within a navigable water. So overlapping authorities that we need to evaluate as part of our process. Okay, so here are some categories of waters of the United States. We've got interstate waters. Those are waters that cross state boundaries. There are impoundments of jurisdictional waters. Um, so these are tributaries that would be regulated on their own, but there was an impoundment to create a lake behind it, and they're still regulated as impoundments. We have tributaries, which are streams that flow down and eventually get to navigable waters. We've got adjacent wetlands, so those are wetlands adjacent to one of the other regulated waters, and interstate lakes and ponds that do not fall within one of the other four categories. All right, so here are some of the exclusions of waters that we do not regulate. Waste treatment systems, prior converted cropland. So these are certain farmed areas that fit particular parameters. Certain ditches, artificially irrigated areas that would revert to dry land if the irrigation ceased. Certain artificial lakes and ponds, such as ponds that were excavated for ornamental purposes and things like that, or swimming pools. Artificial reflecting or swimming pools or other ornamental water bodies we don't regulate. Certain water-filled depressions that don't tie in to other regulated waters, and swales and erosional features. Okay, so the types of permits or authorizations at our disposal. If somebody comes in and they want to do a project and it involves placing fill in a regulated water, then they would have to get a permit from us. So we have two broad categories of permits. We've got individual permits and general permits. So the general permits are they're for a certain type of activity, and you have nationwide permits. That these general permits are developed at our headquarters level, and for particular suites of activities. And I forgot to mention at the beginning, you may see these sheets on your table. And so we are looking for your feedback. And so there's a series of questions. We're also asking if you want to be placed on our public notice list to be able to comment on projects, the individual permits that go out for public comment. And you can send it, you can fill it out today and we'll take it with us, or you can send it via email. And I thought of it because there's a question about general permits, because there are ones that we do at the national level and there are ones that we do at the regional or district level. And so we have the capability of creating general permits that make it easier for you to get authorization for activities that are minimal impact that you do frequently. So one of the questions is if you have any of these types of activities that you would like us to consider to create a general permit for you. And the general permit program, they're valid for 5 years at a time, after which they need to be reauthorized in order to continue using them. And they may be modified during the reissuance. There are special conditions that go along with using that general permit to ensure that it's a minimal impact activity, and those special conditions may change with the reauthorization. Also, for the nationwide permit program, there are regional conditions in addition to the special conditions that headquarters issues. And that is something that comes through the division that I review those conditions. And if they get approved, then they would be added on as additional conditions to using that nationwide permit within our region. So the individual permits, those are basically everything else. They're the things that don't fit into the categories of any of the general permits that we currently have. And they're called individual permits because we have to review the impacts of that project individually. But there are two types of them. There's standard permits and there's letter of permission. So letters of permission, therefore less controversial types of standard permits. They've got minor impacts. We need to coordinate with other agencies and with the adjacent property owners, the neighbors to that property. But there's no public notice that goes out to the general public because they're so low in their impacts. And standard permits, these are project-specific evaluations and authorizations. We put these out on a public notice, and anybody in the public can comment on these projects, and we have to take those comments into account, and we send them to the applicant for their response to them, and we will include that in our consideration of the permit and to see did that comment have merit, and was that actually addressed, and or do we have to maybe modify the conditions of that permit? For individual permit, we can create our own conditions specific for that permit, so we can put a condition in there specifically to address a concern that was raised in a comment to a public notice. So all of our 404 permits require compliance with other laws, such as the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, the Endangered Species Act, ESA, the National Historic Preservation Act, Section 401 Water Quality Certification, which there was a session on that earlier. I hope some of you were able to make that, and our tribal policy. All right, so let's talk about the consultation policy. So here are some tenets that are laid out in the consultation policy. One is tribal sovereignty, recognizing that federally recognized tribes are inherent sovereign governments to be treated with dignity and respect. Trust responsibility, that we are to meet trust obligations, protect trust resources, and obtain tribal views of trust and treaty responsibilities. So some of this may be information that you might provide to us during the course of a permitting process. That you know, we've done our best to catalog these trust lands through the mapping program through our TNTCX, but maybe there's something that we didn't know about. Government to government. Ensure that core leaders and tribal leaders meet as governments and recognize that tribes have the right to be treated in accordance with principles of self-determination. Pre-decisional consultation. We are to involve the tribes collaboratively before and throughout the decision-making process. Self-reliance, capability building, and growth. Search for ways to involve the tribes in programs, projects, and other activities that build economic capacity and manage tribal resources while preserving cultural identities. So, you know, we were talking earlier, and one of these areas that might fit in this category is if you have a restoration project that you want to do on your tribal land, and you could possibly approach us for a mitigation bank, and that would be a way for you to get funding to do the project, and actually sell credits that may be beneficial for the tribe. We are trying to get more mitigation banks into the ground, and so we're reaching out and trying to find new partners for that. Natural and cultural resources. Preserve and protect trust resources and consider the potential effects of core programs on natural and cultural resources. Okay. So we have a new tribal consultation policy that came out in 2023. A little history. On January 26, 2021, the president issued a memorandum to the heads of all federal agencies entitled Tribal Consultation and Strengthening Nation-to-Nation Relationships. The memorandum reaffirms Executive Order 13175, consultation and coordination with Indian tribal governments, signed back in 2000, and the policy announced in the presidential memorandum signed in 2009. The new tribal consultation policy was signed in December of 2023, and it replaces the 2012 policy. The intent is to improve relationships, improve collaboration and coordination in stewardship of the nation's water resources across the civil works mission areas. And it was developed with extensive tribal input and consultation. All right, so you may be asking, what are some of the changes from the 2012 policy? So they increased the topics and actions that the Corps of Engineers must consult with tribes on, primarily driven by tribal interest. This would not be a unilateral use-case determination. We want it to be collaborative. There's an enhanced focus on partnership and incorporating indigenous knowledge into our decision-making. Accountability. There's increased requirements for documentation and a requirement to follow up on tribal input. If you provide input, then we have to get back to you and tell you what our decision was and whether or not we included that input in our decision and why. There are new responsibilities of the commanders. There's 9 specific action areas for the commanders. The commanders are the military personnel that are assigned that lead each of the districts and division offices. And I have a slide coming up which goes over the specific requirements for the commanders. Consistency and capacity. We are to promote consistency across the regions and the districts, provide greater training to Corps of Engineers staff on how to engage tribes. And this policy now applies to our operations section, including the 408 program. So the 408 program is basically if there's a project that is going to intersect with a Corps of Engineers project or federal project, that we have to go to our operations section and do this 408, get the 408 determination, which determines that the project is not going to impact that federal project. Okay, so what are the responsibilities of the commanders? They are to build relationships with tribal nations after each change of command. So the commanders are appointed for a limited period of time, usually 2 or 3 years, and then they change, and a new commander takes on that role. When we get a new commander in, that they are supposed to engage with the tribes and build those relationships. They're to develop a plan for knowledge transfer related to tribal relationships when a change of command happens. So if one commander creates a relationship with a tribe and collects certain information, or knows this tribe is concerned about this issue, they're supposed to keep a record of that. And when the new commander comes in, they're supposed to sit down and tell them those things so that there's a continual record and there's consistency between commanders. They're to remove procedural impediments to working with the tribal nations whenever possible. They are to share our regulations and procedures with the tribal nations. They're to maintain open lines of communication and transparency throughout the consultation process. The correspondence will occur with the tribal leaders, and whenever the commander is engaging with the tribes. However, routine and follow-up communication may be delegated. They're to encourage partnership on projects with the tribal nations. They're to encourage collaborative cooperation and partnership with other federal and state agencies to further the tribal goals and projects. And they shall use their best efforts to understand, uphold the treaties with the tribal nations in their area of responsibility. Okay, so what's not new? We have a 2016 op board that's still in effect. The tribal consultation responsibilities in the regulatory program signed by Brigadier General Semonite. There's still an obligation for meaningful pre-decisional government-to-government consultation. It applies to the regulatory program and those three authorities that I mentioned earlier. We must consult when there is a potential to materially affect protected tribal resources or tribal rights. We must initiate an ask and not assume, documentation and required follow-up must go back to the tribes. We have a duty to protect hunting, fishing, and gathering on and off reservation locations. The duty belongs to the agency. It's not the applicant's responsibility. It applies to resident or removed tribal nations. And all districts should have guidance and practices in place for identifying and evaluating potential impacts to tribal resources, tribal rights, tribal lands, and historic properties, and ensuring that meaningful consultation with tribes occurs for the regulatory actions. Okay, so let's talk more about the 2023 Tribal Consultation Policy. So there's a greater need for documentation for accountability purposes. We will provide timely written responses to tribes on how their input was considered in our process. We will describe any outcomes and decisions. It must include an explanation how the Corps of Engineers is protecting tribal rights, interests, and resources. We must explain any reasons for not meeting mutual consensus and any reasons for not avoiding adverse effects. We must consider and incorporate indigenous knowledge when it is provided for the planning, design, construction, operations, and permit review. And we will support tribal self-determination, self-reliance, and capability building. The Corps of Engineers will not assume that a lack of response is acceptance of the Corps decision or presumption of no implications for the tribal nation. Our staff is supposed to pick up the phone and call or somehow contact you if we don't hear back, and not presume that just because we haven't heard back that you don't have anything to say about the project. All right. So that confirmation can only happen through consultation with the tribe. Okay. So here are some of the consultation elements and the activities that trigger that consultation. I've color-coded this for you. So the green ones are actions that are handled either at my level, at the regional level, or at the district level. The blue ones are actions that happen at our headquarters level or at the Assistant Secretary of the Army level. So I talked about the general permits earlier. So the regional general permits are ones that we create either at the division level or at the district level. And so for those projects that we are supposed to consult with you on those potential permitting a suite of activities that may affect your lands. The nationwide permits, so that happens at our headquarters level, and they do their own consultations for that. However, there are regional conditions that go along with those permits, and that happens at the regional level. So so that you can have a say in either of those levels. Permit applications, that happens at the district level. Requests for approved jurisdictional determinations. So it's not a requirement that an applicant get an approved jurisdictional determination before applying for a permit. We have processes where basically they can agree to presume that we have the ability to regulate that water, and it allows them to get through the permitting process faster. And it's especially beneficial if it's not going to make a difference to the project. Like some of these general permits, you would be able to get authorized without mitigation. And so, and it's a quick and easy permit to get. So it may not be in the applicant's best interest to get an HAD. However, in our new consultation policy, there is tribal consultation that may be required for an approved jurisdictional determination. That's a new thing for us. Those Section 4.8 permissions, these are the permissions when a project is going to intersect a federal project. And then at the headquarters level, rulemaking process. So these are for new rules that will tell you how a certain law is going to be implemented, or changes in how a law is going to change, how it's being implemented. Promulgation of regulations and policies, and policy guidance on treaty rights affect determinations regardless of land status. And the permit actions will include an analysis to determine if activities have tribal implications or substantial direct effects. So in South Pacific Division, we use the Tribal Treaty Manual and Dashboard Viewer for the Regulatory Division. And this is the tool that was developed by our TNTCX using their best available knowledge of tribal resources. All right, so that is the end of my presentation. We are open for questions and comments, and all four of us are available. Yes.
So I don't.
Okay.
Is the operation of a dam exempt from the Clean Water Act? The quality of the water coming out of the dam. Okay. Yes, so is the operation of an Army Corps of Engineers dam exempt from the Clean Water Act? In other words, the water coming out of that does not have to meet the water quality standards of the receiving body.
So I don't believe so, but that's outside of what we regulate with the regulatory program.
I'll try to tackle this
Okay.
one. So in the construction of the dam itself, and the decision to put the dam in place, right, the Corps goes through its own NEPA process, and it's not handled through regulatory. So the Civil Works goes through its own planning, public engagement, tribal engagement if necessary. And then there's a operation and maintenance phase once the dam is complete. And that also has certain regulations that it needs to follow. Again, we don't regulate ourselves. So the regulatory division under Civil Works doesn't oversee those Civil Works projects. That is built into the planning and operation of the dams.
2 minutes.
Well, some of these were built in the 50s, way before NEPA. So again, the question is, the actual operation of the dam, is it exempt from the Clean Water Act?
It's not. It shouldn't be. And any changes to, in terms of like operation and maintenance, it should be going through NEPA and also the Section 106 process. Tribes should be consulted under any operation and maintenance activities that are happening at the dam. So it'll still apply. USA's tribal consultation policy will still apply. That should be happening.
So does the water quality coming out of a federal facility have to meet state water quality standards?
I don't know about state.
Out of my realm. I'm not, the state regional water quality control board would be the entity to ask for that.
If the federal government can't answer that, they don't have jurisdiction, you're saying?
I personally cannot answer that question. Somebody on our team could, but they're not in the house today.
We have a water resources department that I can put you in contact with. All of us could.
Yeah, we're happy to take questions back to other Corps of Engineers programs and get answers back for you. So we have a question over here.
Hello. Oh, hi. My question is, how do you interact and deal with California tribes that don't have treaties but are recognized and have land bases? Because with a lot of other agencies, we've been seeing them say no treaty assets for like massive amounts of the state, and that they don't have to consult or protect areas. And I'm wondering if if the Army Corps looks at it the same way or has a different way of dealing with non-treaty tribes.
Okay.
So for tribes that, well, we don't have any treaties, right, in the state of California with tribes. So when we're thinking of consultation, we're thinking of all ancestral territories, and we're consulting with the tribes to make sure that we're protecting them. And if there is an adverse effect, we're mitigating. But that happens through close consultation. And for tribes that are not federally recognized within the state of California, we do still coordinate and consult with them. So with the Corps, we're kind of a unique agency because we actually do consult with non-federally recognized tribes. I have a project that I'm working on right now where we're mitigating for some adverse effects that were caused. And it's, it's very interesting how we could do that. So there are opportunities to do that. And we're looking at historic sites. We're looking at anything the tribes feel is relevant to that landscape within the project area.
So we're running over. We'll take one more question, and then we'll be outside to answer more questions and talk to you some more.
So I don't have a question. I just want to touch back on this gentleman's question about how the states would look at water quality. Speaking for the state of Arizona, as water quality in surface waters would be regulated by the state.
Thank you all for coming. Like I said, we will be outside to talk to you some more, and fill out the sheets. You can hand it to us or you can email it to us. And so Mike has the box back there. And we're also available to set up sessions